All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am Amanda Williams and I'm joined by Jim Zobel, and we are both historians here at the MacArthur Memorial. And we have an interesting topic for you today. And it has to do with MacArthur and his escape from Corregidor and a rumor that is often repeated about that escape. Now, March 11th, 1942, General Douglas MacArthur, his family, and select members of his household and staff board several PT boats and begin a dangerous escape that will take them from the doomed island of Corregidor to the relative safety of Australia, where MacArthur then makes his famous "I shall return" promise. Now, through the years, there have been a number of questions about this escape. Some of the most frequent questions are, why did MacArthur leave? What were his orders? And did he smuggle a mattress stuffed with gold out of the Philippines during this escape attempt? So let's just get right into it. We hear people say all of the time that General MacArthur engineered his departure from the Philippines. And we know that he's a master of information operations and propaganda, and he literally has the eyes of the world focused on this tiny corner of the Philippines in early 1942. Jim, do you think that he actively used this influence that he had with the press and with this to basically orchestrate his own rescue?
Well, yeah, because he had that mattress of gold, and he wanted to spend all the gold. No, I've never run into anything like that. I don't think that there was any bit of engineering going on. It was just the situation as it was at that time. Everything was falling apart everywhere, and they made the decision that they wanted MacArthur to go to Australia. John Curtin, the prime minister there, had been asking for MacArthur. Churchill was behind this thing. Singapore was just falling. The Australia, British, Dutch, American command was falling apart. Things were going south in the Philippines. So it was just, this situation where they eventually came to the decision that they didn't want MacArthur taken prisoner and hung in Imperial Plaza, like, Tokyo Rose was talking about almost every night. So they made the decision to haul him out of there, and take him down to Australia and take command of what would be the effort to defend Australia, and then eventually the drive back to the Philippines.
You mentioned Australian Prime Minister Curtin, and you mentioned British Prime Minister Winston Churchill wanting MacArthur out of there, but who is behind the actual decision to take him out of the Philippines, at least in terms of the United States? Is it the White House? Is it people in the War Department? Is it Marshall?
It's gonna be Roosevelt. It's gonna be Roosevelt who is the one that decides ultimately to get him out of there. The thing was that Australia, the Japanese are moving on them. While the Philippine campaign's going on, the Japanese are still going. They're headed to Rabaul. They're moving down to New Guinea. The Australians have 2 divisions that just surrendered in Singapore. They have nothing there. The rest of their army is in North Africa with the British, and so they are seriously worried, about this now. And their feeling is that, if they can get an American commander there, they've got the Americans on their back. Because the British are getting hammered. The Nazis, have hammered them by the air. They're all totally positioned into North Africa. They're not going to be sending anything to Australia. So it's a lot of their push onto Roosevelt, to get MacArthur out of there.
When is that decision made in the United States?
We know that it's got to be sometime in mid-February, because we found that message where Marshall sends to MacArthur on 14 February and says, we really think you ought to reconsider about sending your wife and kid out, because there could come a time here soon where we're going to move you somewhere else. And so we know that they're thinking about it, that early, a week before the actual message to get out actually comes, just because they say right in there. So, and the Singapore falls that day that they sent, that message is sent. And so everything is happening very rapidly. They had just ordered Kazan out. They were going to get all the State Department people out. They knew that this thing in the Philippines was going to be over. The Americans and the Filipinos had fought Homa, General Masahiro Homa, to a standstill on Bataan, but they're going to bring in reinforcements, and that, you know, that's pretty obvious. And so it just comes to that time frame, you know, at that point where they start really considering that they're going to pull him out, you know, and then it'll come a week later on the 23rd where they actually order him to proceed to Australia.
How does he find out about the order, and what is his reaction?
Well, from what we know, the people that were there, they said they were in one of the laterals, the headquarters lateral at Malinta Tunnel, and a Signal Corps officer brought in a message and gives it to MacArthur. And Clark Lee, who was a very famous journalist, and he'll escape Corregidor too later on in a very harrowing trip himself. But he was there when MacArthur got this message, and he said he just turned white and completely, this guy who had exuded all this confidence and everything, all of a sudden looked like he was a shell. And Clark Lee noticed it immediately. Sid Huff was there, said exactly the same thing, like that all the life had been immediately drained out of MacArthur because of this, you know, you're ordered out and you're going to leave all your men there. And then the first thing he does is says, "Where's Jean?" And that's Jean MacArthur, his wife, because the original message that comes through says, "You, your wife, son, and chief of staff will be removed from the island of Corregidor." Now, MacArthur and a few other staff members said that MacArthur said, "Well, I'm just going to resign and I'm going to stay here." You know, there's nothing written down, you know, by MacArthur on anything like that. But that night, the staff had a conference, one of the few times MacArthur ever has like a council of war with anybody. And they tell him, "No, look at all this stuff that's waiting in Australia. You know, we can get down there." They're going through all the message traffic that's been sent to them over those previous couple of months, and they come to the conclusion that they can go down there and have this force to come back and redeem the Philippines. And we look back on that now and say, you know, how could you believe that? But, you know, when you're a rat in a cage, you can believe anything. And so MacArthur the next day radios to Washington that he will follow the order, but he wants to choose the time and place, because he says, you know, this is going to be devastating to the command if all of a sudden the commander in chief just, you know, pulls up and leaves. And so they agree to that. And but that's basically how he hears about it. People have said that they sent messages, a couple of other messages about him leaving, but I've never seen any of those, you know, and nobody's ever sourced any of those. We have the one message here that says you're going to be leaving, but, you know, nothing leading up to that. But then again, we don't have that message where apparently they were telling him, you know, we can get Jean off, because we just have the message says you should reconsider that. So it's kind of, you know, not everything is here, but, you know, nobody else has produced a source for these other messages.
And the order is coming from who? I mean, is this an order from your commander in chief?
Well, it comes from Marshall, but
Marshall.
It says the president has ordered you out. You know, so the order itself comes from the president. The thing is that he wasn't supposed to take anyone with him, but that night, Dick Sutherland, his chief of staff, sits down and types out a list of 13 officers, the 2 top Navy guys, and then, you know, all the staff for MacArthur that are going to go with them when they make the breakout, however they're going to do it at that time, you know, be it by submarine, or what MacArthur's thinking is by PT boat. You know, that's the way he's feeling he's going to go. And, you know, Washington never really knows about that, you know, that he's going to pull out all these other people too. And it's almost like, you know, don't ask permission, just explain it afterward. As well, MacArthur brings his son's nanny, you know, Achu, which will be the most controversial of all of them that are taken off of there, because everybody's like, why didn't you take some of the nurses or something like that? But, you know, she would have been tortured to death, you know, being as close to the MacArthurs, and she was part of their family. It wasn't like she's you know, the nurse. It was like, she's part of our family. And, you know, she lives with Jean MacArthur until she dies, you know, in the 1970s. So that's not just saying that, that's the truth. you know, Achu was a part of them.
Mm. Now, is it true that he initially says, "Look, I'm not going to leave. I'm going to resign. You know, my commission. I'm going to stay here and fight." Are there any truth to that rumor?
Well, that's the thing where, you know, all the staff members said that, you know, that MacArthur was saying that. But like he, you know, he doesn't have a diary or anything, and he doesn't mention that in reminiscences, I don't believe. And so it's basically just what other people have said, you know, that when they have this conference, MacArthur was saying, well, I'm not going to go, you know,
Right.
I'm going to stay here and resign.
Mm.
But you know, as you and I have discussed many times, I think it comes down to Gene and Arthur. You know, MacArthur does not regain that MacArthur of 1918 mentality until they are out of harm's way.
Right.
You know, and it's not until they're in Australia that MacArthur gets his game back. And you know, people can
Mhm.
say what they want, but you know, look at that whole campaign, and that's what. And even Casey, the engineer, he hears about it because he's on Bataan the whole time, or Bataan the whole time, and he makes a nightly run back to Corregidor over the ocean, you know, because he checks out all the engineering, and he goes over there one night, and Sutherland tells him, you know, we're going to be leaving, and Casey said it's all about Gene and Arthur, you know,
Right.
that on the PT boat run down to Mindanao, that's all he's thinking about, you know, is
Right.
getting them out of harm's
Safety.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I guess to backtrack a bit, I guess why are they still there
Yeah.
in February 1942 when they have been able to successfully take other VIPs, other groups of people off of Corregidor, get them on a submarine, get them out of there to
Yeah.
safety? I guess I am always confused by why are Gene and Arthur still on Corregidor with
Yeah.
him when it's
Well,
looking like it's turning into the Alamo Part 2.
they
Why?
they could have gotten out in July when all the officers of the Army's wives went. She said she wanted to set an example. I've seen a lot of people that eventually went into Santa Tomas and the internment camps, that they were all saying to themselves, when Gene MacArthur goes home, that's when I'll go back to the States. So a lot of them were queuing off her. Why she didn't go, she always said that they drank of the same cup. You've got to look at these people. They come from this heroic line of warriors. You know, they revere American history, like uh, they they're living it, which they know they are. MacArthur grows up next to the Alamo. You know, I mean, they've all got that in their mind that, you know, this thing could turn into a, you know, a Travis and a Davy Crockett situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, she doesn't go, and I think that's just really bad for the campaign completely.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's very distracted with them
He's
there.
preoccupied with them.
Yeah.
You know, he's preoccupied with them.
But at the same time, I think a lot of modern historians miss the fact that they are two people, like you said, imbued with this sense of heroism, with these stories of American military history. And they are both incredibly willing to die for that, to be part
Oh
of that
yeah,
narrative.
you know,
So,
I wonder a lot about that too. You know,
yeah.
like if it came down to the Japanese coming into the tunnel, you know,
Yeah.
here we go.
I think they were prepared for that. Okay, so quickly, can you walk us through a timeline of basically from the order to leave to them actually leaving?
Right.
What's happening?
Well, the 23rd, they get the message. Like I said, MacArthur has the conference with Gene. That night, they have the conference among the staff. The next day, MacArthur tells them um, they're going to be going. Now, everybody thinks they're going to go by submarine. I mean, everybody in the War Department, all the officers think they're going to be going by submarine. The War Department's told them we will detail a submarine to come there. And then MacArthur starts thinking of this PT boat breakout. And Buckley, who's Lieutenant Commander John Buckley, he runs Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3. He said that Sid Huff, and Huff is Colonel Huff. He's a aide to MacArthur. He's like the #1 aide to Gene, but he had been a naval officer. He was the guy who ran the PT boat campaign for the Philippine Navy that MacArthur was running. And he comes to see Buckley on about the 26th of February and asks him the feasibility of a run from Corregidor down to Mindanao. And then that night, Rockwell, who's the admiral, head of the 16th Naval District there, he'll be one of the guys that goes, he goes to Buckley and starts saying, don't run your torpedo boats anymore. Do patrols, but don't overwork them. These are the 77-foot mahogany Elko boats, 3 Packard marine engines. They have no spare parts. They've been running these things, full time. These things need a rework every couple of days. They're put together with baling wire, basically, and it's a miracle that they can, even get these things to work. But then on the 28th, MacArthur has Buckley come over to Corregidor, and they do a trial run. Gene gets on one of the boats. They go around Manila Bay. They do a ceremony where Buckley is awarded the Distinguished Service Cross because he was doing like boarding raids on Japanese barges, shooting them up all over the place. And the guy was just he was a total warrior. But that night, MacArthur calls him to his home, which is outside of Malinta Tunnel. It's in the officers' quarters down towards the eastern end of the island. And he tells Buckley, then I'm going to go by PT boat. I want to make this run across. I think it'll be a lot safer. Some people, wonder if MacArthur was claustrophobic about getting to these submarines. I think MacArthur also wanted to prove that the blockade was a farce, that they could, get through this Japanese blockade, maybe prove to the Navy that this is something that could be done. A lot of the staff starts learning about what's going to happen because it's not till about a week later, coming around the 28th, 29th, or 28th and 1st of March, that a lot of the staff starts hearing they're going to be going. Sutherland takes this guy, Pick Diller, who's the public relations officer, outside of Malinta Tunnel for a smoke one night and tells him we're going to be leaving. And then Diller says that in the lead up to leaving, he starts getting all this mail from people like, you give this to my wife, and so Diller starts talking about there's a leak, somebody's leaking out. But then Steve Melnick, who's a Coast Artilleryman, he got captured and later on, and he escaped from Davao Penal County. Well, he kept his diary, and he wrote in there that he cornered Diller one night and said, what's going on? And Diller was like, oh, I'll tell you, we're going to leave. This is going. So, Diller's wondering who the leak is. You're the leak, buddy. You're the one that's out there telling everyone you're going to leave. And so all these guys, start getting ready. March 9th, MacArthur calls Buckley over and tells him we're going to leave on the 15th of March, the Ides of March, the day that Caesar gets stabbed. 2 days later, on the 11th of March, MacArthur calls him back and says, we're leaving tonight, so that's how quick it is. And that's in the morning. He says, be back here at 7:30. And so at 7:30, they come back. He comes back. All the other staff went to Bataan because that's where the other boats will pick them up. And then they'll meet right out past the minefield. But that's where people see MacArthur at the dock with Gene and Arthur. He doesn't have anything with him. Gene has that small case that has, like, I think his medals, her slippers, and another hat or something like that. Arthur only has his stuffed animal. Achu has nothing. But then they put a mattress on the PT boat, and it lays on the floor. And all these people huff Gene, talk about that mattress being on the floor, and that was the only place that Arthur could sit down. So it's going to be Gene, Douglas MacArthur, Huff, Achu, and Arthur, and Sutherland, and then this Dr. Robert Morehouse, who's from Bataan. None of them know him. None of them have ever seen him before. He just kind of got picked out of a hat, and all of a sudden he's on the escape boat going to Mindanao with them. But I think that's where that gold thing comes from, is people see this. There's people that watch them get on the B-17s at Mindanao, and they'll say they took all their family furniture with them, which is just utterly ridiculous, about this, because they didn't have anything with them. So the Philippines had removed the Philippine gold by submarine earlier. They had dumped all the silver in the bay. Now you've got this thing, MacArthur's taken out all this, gold in a mattress. And we only really talk about that just because, we had that guy come in here that one time and yelled at me for an hour about the gold in the mattress and how come I wasn't explaining to the world why that wasn't true, so it's just kind of always been kind of goofy.
Do you think that when it comes to the idea of them smuggling this mattress full of gold out of the Philippines, do you think perhaps people that were left behind kind of conflated that with the earlier efforts to get a lot of the gold out of the Philippines on a sub back to the United States?
Yeah,
Do you think
probably.
Or do you think people just saw them carrying this mattress and just figured this is a great story?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody says everything. And there's just, stories like that all over the place. But I think you're right. I think everything feeds into something else, and then it just builds into, something that's ridiculous, because all those guys were there. There was tons of people out there. They knew that you would need 15 guys to carry a mattress stuffed with gold, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And
just
when you
kind of
think it like the stories of the guys that are loading one of those subs with the Philippine government's gold to get it out of there,
yeah,
they talk about how heavy all that stuff is and how, and how careful they are, to
yeah,
make sure that every single brick, every single anything
counted, yeah, yeah.
is gone. And so, yeah, I mean, it would have been real hard to get all that gold on the PT boat. All right. So we've established that.
There's been a rumor even recently that a journalist stowed away on the 41 boat. And, I'm trying to figure this one out. So, that's what, 70, 80 years later. And
Where would you
the
hide on a PT boat?
goofy, exactly.
In a torpedo tube? I don't know. I don't know.
Exactly.
Okay.
I don't know where you would hide.
All right. Well, it's nice that people are still fascinated by these stories and that they keep popping up. All right. So the late Carol Patillo did some research that revealed that MacArthur accepted a large sum of money from the Philippine government in early 1942 prior to his departure from Corregidor. It looks like what happened is that before Philippine President Manuel Quezon is taken out of Corregidor and then taken to the United States, he has the Philippine government transfer $500,000 to MacArthur and then another $140,000 to several other American officers stationed in the Philippines for service from basically 1935 to 1941. The White House, the War Department, they all are aware of this and it is permitted. What is this all about? And do you think some of this maybe ties in with those gold mattress rumors?
Well, nobody really knew about it there on Corregidor. So, I mean, when the rumors started, I don't think they knew much about that. Yeah, the 11th of February, the United States made the decision they wanted to get Quezon out. They had just had that goofy message that MacArthur sent in, where Quezon was saying, I want to go neutral. I want to approach the Japanese about neutralizing the Philippines. And MacArthur had kind of keyed in onto that. And Roosevelt came back and said, you can surrender all the Filipinos you want, but you're not going to surrender any U.S. forces there. And MacArthur said, well, that was never in my mind. But now they got real worried about Quezon collapsing, and they wanted him out of there as soon as possible. And so that's when the submarine Swordfish is assigned to come in and get him. And that's on the 11th, they make this decision to get Quezon out of there. And then on the 13th is when that executive order number 1 is created, which gives MacArthur the money, gives Sutherland the money, gives Marshall money, and one other one, Huff. They give him money. And Paul Rogers, who's the clerk for Sutherland, he's the guy who's going to type this up. He's put on the PT boat, a sergeant, that works on the staff. Now, so this is all kind of, working in. The thing is that, the Americans want Quezon out. So Patillo, made it kind of inference maybe he paid his way out, which is, not true. The reason the War Department went for the deal for MacArthur is because that was part of his contract as Philippine military advisor. He would get like 46% of 100, you know, for every peso that was put into the Philippine defense program, you know, when his time ended. And so that kind of, you know, that comes out to be that exact amount of money.
So
But
it's like some sort of,
Sutherland didn't have that deal.
so it's what, like some sort of
It's like a bonus.
on top of his
Yeah,
salary.
it's a bonus, you know. And
Okay.
right before the war, they dumped, you know, millions of dollars into the program because of all this sugar excise tax money they had.
Right.
And so that's why they okay this, but it goes to Sutherland, it goes to Marshall, it goes to Huff, who didn't have that contract with the Philippines. You know, MacArthur had resigned and was not in the army from 37 until summer of 41, but not so for those other guys. And so the transfer is, they have this trunk full of Philippine, you know, money certificates in Corregidor that Manuel Rojas is responsible for once the payment is made in Washington, once the funds are transferred. And so that's done. And then on the 24th, before they leave, that trunk goes back to Rojas. So it's a very smarmy thing.
Right.
It's one of the, you know, yeah, you were owed it, but it, you know, under the circumstances, it's just pretty raw, you know, to take or to stomach. And so I don't think that so much feeds into those rumors at that point, because nobody really knows. But it's all part of that whole time frame of those, you know, those last couple of weeks, you know, because Kazon's out on the 20th and Sayer's out. Then all of a sudden MacArthur's called, you know, to get out. This payment's made, so it just kind of stinks.
Seems like it was just a very chaotic situation.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
Paul Rogers, that clerk, he said it was a challenge by Kazon to the United States. You know, like, I'm the president of this country. You know, I can do whatever I want. You know, that's the way we do things in the Philippines. And that's the thing. People have, you know, always criticized MacArthur for not doing a lot of things, but when you have the president of that other country who's in your ear saying, these are my people and you are going to starve my people or kill my people by doing this, you know, that was a bad situation right there, you know. So it's very confusing, and when you start getting into it, it gets really, really bad.
And I think the Commonwealth status of the Philippines as it relates to the U.S. government is also pretty confusing and problematic in that first couple months of 1942.
Yeah. Well, you know, MacArthur and Quezon, you know, they're compadres. You know, that's a serious business. You know, Quezon's, you know, godfather to Arthur. You know, it's like, your loyalty isn't to some nation, buddy. Your loyalty is to me. You know, and that's the way they look at it.
It's a very unique relationship. Any final thoughts about the escape? Any final thoughts about the gold mattress rumor?
I don't know. You know, it's a hard thing to stomach for all those guys on Baton Corregidor, and you meet about half of them, and you know, they'll never forget it. The other half kind of understand, you know, what was going on at that point, but it's just it's a horrible, horrible time for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for everyone, and it's can't really blame anyone. Just that's the way history went, you know, and people make a lot of mistakes. People do a lot of stupid things, and people did a lot of good things. And you look back on it and you just think how awesome John Buckley is, you know, how awesome all those PT boat guys are, because they did something completely and totally miraculous.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Jim. I think next time we should talk about MacArthur's Medal of Honor. I think that's an interesting one, but for the future. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
You just love causing trouble, don't you?
All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll be back again, I think, in a couple of weeks.